I realized there are unique, outrageous acts of love that can be committed by me and me alone, and that is the unique purpose, obligation, joy, and responsibility. It's my ability to respond to reality. That's my outrageous act of love.
A planetary awakening in love through a unique self-symphony.
What a privilege it is to be part of this global community.
There's a voice within me that asks, who am I, right? Who am I in all of this?
Each and every one of us has a unique gift to give that we desperately need.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the heart of the revolution. Sorry about our technical challenges this morning. It is with deep joy that we are together today in One Mountain, Many Paths. Our mission is what Barbara Marx Hubbard and Dr. Mark Goffney call a planetary awakening in love through unique self-symphonies. We are activating a new humanity and awakening as a new species, Homo Amor, the fulfillment of Homo sapiens. As a church, a synagogue, a temple, a mosque, a zendo, no one is excluded, everyone is included, and we come together to attune to the evolutionary impulse, awakening within us. Welcome home, everyone. I am Christina Tahel, the co-executive producer, along with Jamie Long and Jacqueline Clark and Krista Josefa, and we are so delighted to be together with each and every one of you today for week 314 of our live global community broadcast. What a privilege it is to be part of a community where we support humanity's flourishing. Use the Zoom and the Facebook chat functions to say hello, to let us know where you're from, to speak your prayers, and to resonate the Dharma. On Zoom, do check that your chat settings say everyone so that we can all hear from you. Care to step deeper into community through the work and the practice of creating the great Homo Amor library? This Thursday, we start a holy editing course, which Krista will speak about at the end of One Mountain, Many Paths. Join us every Monday for Writing to the Evolutionary Love Codes, where we alchemize the love code we are working with each week in One Mountain, Many Paths. Members do receive an email with the details. If you don't receive the email, I personally invite you to step deeper into community and to deepen in contemplative practice and in the evolutionary love code by stepping into membership. What to expect today? First, a Dharma recap from myself, then Dr. Mark Goffney will set our intention, and then David Cicerci will resonate the evolutionary love code that we're working with. And then we step into our evolutionary sense makings, again with Dr. Mark Goffney. And then we move into meditation to enter prayer. Krista invites us deeper into community, and to close, we bring people on for our goodbyes in a short dance practice. I welcome all who are new. We need you. If this is your first time, these teachings do stand on their own. And every week's teaching does build on the week before. We encourage you to listen to previous episodes. You will hear unique language. Trust the magic ways the language or Dharma comes through your understanding. One Mountain, Many Paths is radically committed to telling the new universe story. Now for my recap from last week. Principles of outrageous love, closing the gap between feeling and healing outrageous pain. As we gather from around the world, feel the cables of connection binding and weaving us together as our hearts begin to beat in a synchronous beat. We open our hearts and we ask, why do we not act to heal outrageous pain? It's not often, as it's suggested, because we do not feel the pain. Rather, it's because we feel the pain so intensely and we don't know how to heal it. In the gap between our ability to feel the pain and our ability to heal the pain, we close our hearts. Therefore, the only way to open our hearts is to close the gap. Closing the gap is to realize that it's not ours to heal the whole thing. We heal the pain that's ours to heal in our circle, and that makes us powerful again. Because when we are actually living our unique self, we are addressing the unique pain in our unique circle of intimacy and influence. And when we do that, our hearts open again. And we can feel more than we ever did, filling us with more power and expanding our potency. And then we can heal wider and wider circles. We have to throw off that notion that it's all mine to heal. It's not. That's a narcissistic delusion of the ego. It's mine to feel the whole thing. We feel into existential risk. We feel into the potential death of humanity. We feel into the potential death of our humanity. And we stop doing business as usual. We live in a world of outrageous pain, and the only response to outrageous pain is outrageous love. Outrageous love is at the heart of existence itself. The outrageous lover commits outrageous acts of love. We are not here by mistake. We are privileged to have a community which is actually engaged in the revolution directly. We get to be the privileged and the powerful. The intimate universe allured us into this place where we are with these people in this life and in this situation and this dynamic. And speaking and addressing our unique circles of intimacy and influence, that's where we commit our outrageous acts of love. To be a unique self is to be a unique healer. We are inspired by the chant of reality itself. We are inspired by the pulse, the throb of a tumescent reality awake in every second. We deepen our monogamy, which means that we deepen our primary commitment to being in this revolution, the understanding that the only response that will actually shift the future, the only genuine response to the meta crisis is a superstructure response, which means we lay down our lives to actually tell the new story, because we know that that's what's going to heal suffering. Now, I invite us to more deeply enter into the holy and the sacred spaces of One Mountain, Many Paths. And I turn my word to you, Dr. Mark Goffney.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Right? And it's very funny. I rarely look in the mirror. You just don't, but when you are on screen, you actually see yourself. You're like, whoa, is that what I look like? And then I realize, wow, my hair's graying. Oh my God. Hi, everybody. It is so fantastic to be together. I mean, completely gorgeous. And the demarcating characteristic of enlightenment, my friends, and by enlightenment, we mean the realization of my purpose as a human being. When I actually fulfill, I actually become who I could be, who I was meant to be. I'm aligned with the cosmic purpose for my life. And of course, that begins with the realization that there's a cosmic purpose for my life. So I've got to realize there's a purpose, and I align with that purpose. And then there are certain, what I would call litmus tests for enlightenment. And litmus tests for enlightenment are the ability to experience the full radical newness and importance of the moment as it's happening, and not get caught in somehow going blind, going deaf, being unable to see the significance and beauty of a moment, being unable to hear the resonance of the moment, being unable to smell the fragrance of the moment, being unable to taste the moment, being unable to touch the moment. Because all healing lives in the moment itself. That's why in Hebrew, the word for ragua, right? Deep, spacious, opening, relaxation, when we fall into the depth of who we are, is the same word. It's the same three-letter Hebrew root as rega, which means the moment. And in the moment is its own spaciousness. So the capacity to open the moment. Now, to open the moment, I can't do a kind of, with all due respect to my friend Eckhart, I can't do an Eckhart Tolle kind of power of the now thing. Or truly, my friend, I don't know Eckhart, but truly my friend Ramdas, Richard Alpert, and we liked each other a lot, had a deep love for each other, who talked about be here now. So be here now, and the power of the now is the way it was expressed. And the way it's classically expressed doesn't actually get us there. Because that's about the now moment, which is separate from the past and separate from the future. And there is no now moment, which is separate from the past and the future. So in order to be in the now moment and to engage in the essential process of enlightened living, it's a process that I've got to engage in. It's an action I have to engage in literally in every second. And the basic action is, right? The basic action is nowing. Nowing. Does that make sense? Nowing as a verb. N-O-W-I-N-G, nowing. I step into the depth of the now, but in the depth of the now, I have history and I have future. I have past and future. Past and future live together in the now. So I'm aware of, I'm deeply connected to history and tradition. I'm also deeply connected to the uniqueness of my experience right here in the now. And I feel the future actually available to me here in the present. So for example, I can hear the future generations turning to us in this moment, in this now moment, and saying, are you going to lay your lives down? Are you going to give everything to make sure that we're going to be born? Right? Because we're not in any kind of place where we know that the future will be born. Right? The possibility of the future being unborn or being stillborn, what we call existential risk, right? The meta crisis that's quite real in this moment in time requires the fullness of our presence in the now and the fullness of our response, but it's got to be a now that is not a short-term now. right? We need a kind of wider perspective. We need to get out of our temporal myopia. We're so focused on Ram Dass's now or Eckhart Tolle's no, which are both sweet and lovely modern people reformulating ideas of mystical enlightenment, which said it's only the now. No. In the now is the past and the future, right? So in this now, right, in which we're bringing with us the depth of wisdom of the past, of all the great traditions in their validated insights, both in pre-modernity and modernity and post-modernity. And with this deep reaching for the future and feeling what the future needs for us now, right? That's the quality of enlightenment. And that quality I have to re-experience in every now moment. In every now moment, I've got to re-experience that. And that's the invitation. You know, I was talking this morning to my friend and the co-president of the think tank, the Center for World Philosophy and Religion, Zach Stein. And we were talking, he lives in this house here with me. This is where I live is the actual location of the center. We just got a beautiful center in Vermont, which has a whole bunch of guest bedrooms, and it's going to take us a few months to get it set up so we can actually be working together in Unique Self Symphony, and people can come by and be here. There's 5 guest bedrooms for fellows and researchers. And so we were talking in kind of in the hall for the first time. He was coming down from his room and I was passing, and we passed in the hall, and I had just listened to this incredible clip, and maybe we could put this clip in the chat box, this incredible clip that you know, David kind of led the team in making clips, and then Jamie stepped in and Lady J stepped in, Jacqueline, and they made this incredible clip about You Are Desire. If you have that clip, maybe we can put it in the chat box and people can look at it afterwards. There's a really beautiful clip about human identity, and we're going to talk about that today a little bit. And I looked at the clip and I was blown out of my mind by how important it is what we're doing. That when I go to my friends who are in the woke world, and I look about how they talk about human identity. So for example, the entire techplex, right, comes out of, in a very real sense, the world of liberal culture, where the human being is literally reduced to what I would call a social self, meaning the human being is the sum total of social interactions. And that is the dominant position of liberal culture that actually is forming the world of technology, which are the immersive environments online in which virtually all of us actually have to live in order to function in the world to some real extent, in which the next generation is completely immersed in. So it's not a tool. Technology is not a tool. That's a huge mistake. Technology is an environment. It's an immersive environment, and that immersive environment has its own set of values. And so the primary value, right, of the techplex as it exists now is a particular narrative of human identity, which is that human identity is social. The human being is a social self. And that's been formalized at the MIT Media Lab, for example, in the United States, which is probably the single most powerful place in forming the structure of the techplex in the last 25 years. They've actually articulated this very, very clearly. Alex Pentland, the director of the lab, wrote an article called The Death of Individuality, where he said that the notion of the Western Enlightenment, in which there's a rational self who can make decisions, right, based on value, is dead. And that actually the only real self, he doesn't use this word, but he describes, if you read his writings, he's written many, many articles, and he's kind of a hidden figure in this whole emergence of what I call techno-feudalism. He uses words like social network incentives, or social pressure, right? Or social conditioning, right? Or social norms, right? Or, right? You know, he's got a whole series of words which are basically talking about what his teacher, B.F. Skinner, called positive reinforcers. We reinforce behavior through multiple exposures, right, to other people in your social web, and through very careful collection of data and very careful understanding of how you're motivated, we can actually expose you in different ways to particular groups of friends, right, online in a constant and repetitive way, so that these groups of friends will, in a statistically significant way, shape your behavior. They might cause you to buy, they might cause you to move someplace, they might cause you to vote in a particular way, that we can actually use the techplex to, in Cass Sunstein's term, right, to nudge people right into what the powers that be think is right behavior. That's the social self. And it's a degraded view of self, because it says that the human being is fully exhausted by what? By their social structure. And what we're saying is, and this is what One Mountain Many Paths is about, we're saying, no. What we need to do is, we need to revision who we are. That in order to respond to the meta crisis, we need to re-understand, we need to articulate, right, a genuine new story of who we are. And who we are is not the social self, right, of the liberal world. And yet it's also not, and I go to my colleague and, friend of many, many years ago, I haven't seen him in a long time, Dennis Prager, who created Prager University, which is a good example of conservative thinking all over the world that gets, billions of views. And they articulate a kind of much more traditional, biblical kind of view of the self, who responds to revelation and who is, in a positive way, fulfilling of the values that the Creator God imposed on the world. And there's some truth in that, just like there's some truth in the left. But both of them are pallid, weak versions of who we are, right? The notion that there's a Creator God who's completely outside of the world, who gives us value, and our job is to hear that God's revelation, right? And then to fulfill that value is weak. Not exactly like that. The notion that actually there is no source that actually articulates value in the world, that suffuses the world with value, that we're actually merely social selves responding to social patterns, right? The basic view of the left, right? The basic view of postmodernity, also tragic. So in other words, today, right, in our culture, we've got basically places like Prager University, who are essentially expressing a pre-modern biblical view of the world, and they're fighting with places like the MIT Media Lab, who are pretty much expressing a postmodern view of the world, right? So I would say it's the social self, on the one hand, in the kind of MIT Media Lab techplex. So people like Mark Zuckerberg and Larry Page, right, all are deeply influenced by the MIT Media Lab, and they believe the basic human being is the social self, and that we can heal existential risk and heal the meta crisis by actually organizing the world. People will in the end have identity markers. We'll be able to track people and monitor people. We'll be able to influence behavior. We'll be able to shape elections. We can control the world through the invisible controls of a kind of soft totalitarianism mediated through the techplex. That's one view. And then the other view, which I'm going to call the Prager University view, right, is the view that it's the traditional view that the human being actually can respond to value, that there is a source of value in the world, but that source of value is ultimately outside of the world. That the world itself is neutral, and that there's the source of value from outside the world that actually commands, and it's our job, right, not to follow our instincts, but to follow actually those commanded values and to respond to them, which is also a hugely weak view of the world. Both of those views of the world lead to the meta crisis. Right? So in other words, the Prager University view, right, is I'm a separate self. I should follow the dictates of, right, the external commands, but that actually flies in the face of lots of fragrances and senses of how evolutionary science works and how we actually understand value. So that's actually not going to take the world. And since it's not going to take the world, what's going to wind up causing is rivalrous conflict. Rivalrous conflict, win-lose metrics. And rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics, in which everyone's claiming that they're hearing their version of the commanded voice, actually is one of the core and primary sources of the meta crisis. Wow. And on the other hand, so the meta crisis is extraction models, exponential growth curves, polarization that are all driven by win-lose metrics. And win-lose metrics comes from this traditional view that ultimately all the different systems are clashing with each other. We got to see which system's going to win. That's what the pre-modern world was. The pre-modern world was different systems, generally of thought, of religion, often expressed themselves in a state that argued with each other, that clashed with each other, that were involved in a rivalrous conflict based on win-lose metrics. So if we stay in that traditional story, then we're going to stay in rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics, which generates, right, directly generates all of the dimensions of the meta crisis. Because once you have polarization, right, then you can't actually create a shared grammar of value. You can't create global resonance. You can't create, right, a global coordination that we need, right, to respond to the meta crisis, because everybody's fighting, because everyone thinks they're right. And everyone thinks that they need to triumph and that their view of the world is the correct view of the world. And it excludes the other views. And it's only the triumph of my view that will actually get us home. So it's that kind of rivalrous conflict that doesn't actually fill the human being. They don't have a sense. The human being doesn't have a sense of their own eros, of their own expression of value. So there's a sense of emptiness. And that emptiness creates, right, that failure of eros, that failure of my fullness creates all sorts of pseudo-eros. And pseudo-eros needs to be filled. We need to cover the emptiness of pseudo-eros, and all forms of addiction and acting out, all forms of excessive consumption, which also drive the meta crisis, are the results of that pseudo-eros. On the other hand, when we look at the left side of the aisle, when we look at the techplex and all of its forms, that's going to generate a kind of soft totalitarianism, right? Not the old totalitarianism where you got dragged away to Siberia, but a soft totalitarianism in which we actually engender a kind of invisible police state. But it's a kind of thought police. You know, in very, very short order, everyone will have identity numbers. And those identity numbers will enact some form of what China calls a social credit system, but will enact it in some version or another in the United States as well. So for example, if you opposed the vaccine, which the vaccine was a complex issue, but there were certainly good reasons to oppose the vaccine. If you oppose the vaccine, you lose your job, right? If you don't actually agree to get a vaccine, even though there's quite a bit of medical information that challenges vaccines. Vaccines are a very complex issue and on both sides. And I've tried to bring both sides together to sit in a room and talk about this face to face, and I've been unsuccessful. But if you actually oppose the vaccine and the mandate to get a vaccine, you can be fired from your job. My good friend, Dr. Venu Julapalli, who's a brilliant doctor with his brother Vinay, right, down in Houston, neither of them actually got vaccinated, and they didn't get vaccinated, you know, one because he was part of a health study, and the other because he actually opposed the vaccine, right, in principle, not the vaccine itself, but that the hospital administration would mandate doctors to take the vaccine and give the vaccine. And he felt that was correctly a health decision, right, that needed to be made by doctors, and that when the hospital administration hijacks the autonomy of the doctor in making a health decision, and they're violating the basic relationship between doctor and patient. And so Venu is actually beautifully filing a lawsuit against Houston Methodist. But Venu is just one example. People have gotten fired from their jobs all over the place because they didn't agree with a particular policy, right? Travel is restricted. And what's going to begin to happen is travel's restricted, jobs are restricted, access, and what will begin to happen is access to loans will be restricted, education will be restricted, and won't be just about the vaccine. It will be about, if you take issue with the kind of dominant policies and views of the culture, then you will somehow be blackballed by that culture. And because you're online and there's extensive information about what you're watching and what your opinions are and how you feel about things, because we now have even emotion detectors on the web, right? The field of affective computing, right? Tracking your emotion as you engage on the web is actually exploded out of MIT Media Lab in the last 10, 15 years. And actually, Alex Pentland, many of his students are actually leading, right, that thing called affective computing. So actually how you feel about things, how you respond, right, is going to particular images will actually allow us to track you very, very carefully. And when we track you carefully, if you take issue, so let's say there's an argument about the environment, and let's say there's a particular position on the environment which has a particular understanding of how you should think about fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are actually a far more complex issue, right, than the way they're cast. It's not fossil fuels are evil. Fossil fuels are complex. Fossil fuels have saved many lives. The environmental issues are complex. My friend, two friends, Sean Hargens and Michael Zimmerman, wrote a book called Integral Ecology, which takes you through the kind of much more complex set of issues that need to be considered in terms of the environment. But if you don't actually agree with the dominant position on the environment that's expressed by the dominant fields of media, then you will be, in some sense, once there's a kind of almost voluntary social credit system, right? It's not imposed by the government, but it's actually imposed by some sort of alliance between the formal agencies of structure, like, for example, Houston Methodist Hospital, that actually said to Venu, you actually have to get a vaccine. If not, you can't work here, right? And that will be extended. There'll be many, many more areas in which the core notion of freedom, the freedom to think carefully, right? The freedom to dissent will be lost. You know, Ronald Reagan was not wrong when he said you can lose freedom in one generation. Ronald Reagan was wrong about a lot of things, but he was not wrong about this, right? So that notion of the techplex is also a dangerous, problematic notion, right? Governed by a certain view of who the human being is. So, and it leads, right, to kind of a soft totalitarianism, right, to the death of our humanity, right? So if the separate self view of the human being who is a separate self, and human beings and systems of human thought or rivalrous conflict governed by human win-lose metrics, if that leads to existential risk, the potential death of humanity, because rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics is actually the primary block of our ability to do global coordination. We can't do global coordination, as we've said many times, without global resonance. You can't do global resonance without global intimacy. You can't do global intimacy without a shared story of value, which is not rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics. There's actually a shared story of value that we all get on board on. If we can't get on board in that, then we get to potential existential risk, the death of humanity. That's on one side, that's on the right. And on the left, we get to the death of our humanity. We get to a soft totalitarianism imposed by a techplex, right, around the world, both in Western open societies and in closed societies, just different forms, right, of this kind of totalitarianism, in which you actually lose the ability to dissent, to think freely, to gather information, right, to draw conclusions based on evidence and information, when there's a dominant narrative motivated by whatever the series of motivations are. And sometimes they're sinister, and sometimes they're very natural, and they're for the sake of health, and they're for all sorts of good and noble purposes. But when there's a dominant narrative and you challenge that dominant narrative, right, then you're considered, right, somehow aberrant, and you lose access, right, to the goods of society, right? That's where we're headed on the left. That's a big deal. So in order to respond to that, what do we need to do? We need to actually take the best of what the left understands, the sense of a social self, of participating in the larger social structure, right? The best of the techplex, which actually has enormous goods to offer, the best of the traditional world, the best of the separate self, and from there articulate a new shared narrative of identity. That's a big deal. So how many people tracked that? That was a lot. That was a lot. You guys track that? How many people tracked that? Anybody? Right? Who else? Who else tracked that? It was a lot there. Yeah? How you guys doing? Okay, that was a lot. Right? We tracking that? That's what we're going to do here today. It's a big deal. We're going to articulate here today a new narrative of identity that actually integrates the best of the right and the left and offers us a way forward in response to the meta crisis. That's crazy exciting. So here we go. David, if you're up for it, let's resonate the code. Let's take it from there. Here we go.
All right. Thank you, Mark. So if you're new, the code is a distillation of the teachings for the day, right? And here at One Mountain, Many Paths, we're clarifying intrinsic value. So it's not just made up, and we're not just here being one with reality, just sort of without words. Words are so valuable here, and it brings so much clarity. So as I resonate the code, let's just see how it sinks into the body and into the heart. This week's evolutionary love code. Human life is not an event, it's a journey. In all of the interior and evolutionary sciences, the journey is understood to be a journey of transformation. In the most advanced understanding of that human journey, there are 7 stages of transformation. These are what we term the 7 selves. The journey through the 7 selves, to the best of our understanding, is the purpose of a human life in the manifest world. So here I'll go through it again. Human life is not an event, it is a journey. In all of the interior and evolutionary sciences, the journey is understood to be a journey of transformation. In the most advanced understanding of the human journey, there are 7 stages of transformation. These are what we term the 7 selves. The journey through the 7 selves, to the best of our understanding, is the purpose of the human life in the manifest world. So with that, I turn my word back to you, Dr. Mark.
Let's take a look at this, okay? So how do we respond? Right? How do we respond? How do we respond to kind of traditionalism on the one hand, which brings us in the end to rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics, because the human being is a separate self, and then each religion, each system is its own kind of communal separate self, and they're in rivalrous conflict, right? So that's one vision that's actually important and has value but limited. And on the other hand, we've got kind of the kind of techplex social self, which is important. It's actually saying something important and valid, but can lead us, right, to a kind of death of our humanity. So one can lead us to the death of humanity, the other can lead us to the death of our humanity, right? Because answers to simple questions, how we answer simple questions, meaning the framework that we live in, right? Our fundamental answer to the simplest of questions actually creates our society. Just like in complexity theory, simple first rules generate a vast complex system. That's the mathematics, if you will, of complexity theory. In exteriors, so too in interiors, we generate a whole system through simple first rules, and simple first rules are always about how we answer the most fundamental questions. So the most fundamental question we want to address today is who, okay? And if you didn't get the first part, if it was a little bit, kind of over your head, right? Totally, let it go. You can step in right here perfectly. Okay, so everyone ready to go? Let's step in right here together, okay? Here we go. Who are you? So life is actually a journey, an evolutionary journey, in which we actually move through deeper and deeper answers to the question of who are you? And what I want to do in these short few minutes is take the best information we have in the traditional period, from the validated insights of the traditional period, the best information we have from the validated insights of the modern period, the best information we have from the validated insights of the postmodern period, weave them together without referring to any of them into a new vision of self, which is, I believe, the best understanding we have today in response to the question of who are you? So here we go. Who are you? Self one. So self one is a pre-self. And self one is what I would call the pre-personal self. And the pre-personal self is, for example, the baby before the baby separates, individuates from the mother. That's a pre-personal self. So the personal hasn't yet come online, and the baby's identity is fully defined in terms of the mother. In about 18 months, Margaret Mallow points out, separation, individuation happens, which is kind of a second birth. We would call that a pre-personal self, but that pre-personal self lives, right, not only in a baby, that pre-personal self lives in our lives. So for example, a cult, C-U-L-T, a cult in its negative form is when I don't have an identity outside of, independent of the identity of the cult leader or the community of the cult. So I feel like if I leave the cult, I die. Right? If I leave the breast of my mother, I die. So that's an example of pre-personal consciousness. It also might take place in a gang, right? So let's say you've got a gang, in a bad part of LA or in a bad part of Buenos Aires in Argentina or in a bad part of Hong Kong, right? Where the neighborhood is tragic, right? And hasn't yet been lifted out of poverty. And there's enormous sense of hopelessness. And I join a gang. Often the structure of the gang is such where allegiance to the gang, identity in the gang, right, is pre-personal. I have to give up the personal in order to participate, right, in that gang. So that's a sense of the pre-personal. Now stay close. We then have the capacity as we grow up in a kind of whole growing, we move from the pre-personal to the personal. And I'm going to call this level one personal. We move to the personal. And the personal is what we might call separate self. Separate self. Now, separate self is the experience that I live within the boundaries of this body, that I'm not defined exclusively by the mother. I can actually individuate from the mother. So therefore, I can't spend my whole life blaming my mother. Right? Whatever my mother issues were, I actually individuate, right? I'm no longer pre-personal, right? There's something about contemporary therapy, right, which blames quote unquote the mother, whether it's the mother or the father, which basically is a failure to individuate. I'm still in my pre-personal self, so I can't actually take responsibility as a separate self. And it's not that I don't work out my early childhood issues. It's not that I don't work out my attachment patterns, but actually the obsession with attachment patterns, right, that actually dominates the therapeutic culture, right, of the contemporary West is a kind of arrested pre-personal self. I actually haven't individuated, right, into my separate self. And my separate self is this notion that I'm responsible, right? I actually have some power, right? And I'm defined by my identity, right, as the boundary of myself. And I'm not defined in terms of the fascist state. I'm not defined in terms of only the tribe or only the gang or only the cult, but I have an individuated identity. That's a separate self. Now, stay close, friends. In the West, the separate self, the Western Enlightenment, viewed the separate self as being the end of suffering and the beginning of liberation. Because in the pre-modern period, people identified only with the larger group. Right, with the state, with the religion, right, with the tribe, right, and finish that sentence however you'd like, with the clan. And so the ability in the Renaissance to step out and actually experience myself, and actually the word self, right, in the Western Enlightenment actually is born. The word self comes and finds its way into dictionaries, right, for the first time. So that's the separate self. Now, the separate self is real in the mind of God. It's the notion that you've got to just move beyond your separate self and your separate self story, and that's just a story that you have to move beyond, right, is a very, very bad notion that's peddled, in many, many Enlightenment circles, but it's a fundamental mistake. It actually took us a long time in evolutionary unfolding to get to this realization of separate self, and you don't want to actually just roll it back. Till we got to a frontal cortex with a neocortex with its frontal lobes, that was a big deal. And our capacity to view ourselves as a separate self is a great evolutionary leap through, great evolutionary momentous breakthrough. It's a very big deal. It's that moment, the separate self is the moment when I say, this is my story, and I embrace it. It's a big deal. I don't try and get out of it. I don't try and dismiss it. I actually look at my story in the eye and I say, wow, you are me and I am you. And in this manifest world, right, I'm in charge of this story and it's mine to live. And I'm going to bring all of my power and all of my poignancy and all of my pathos and all of my feeling and all of my capacity, right, to actually live as powerfully as I can, right, to be in the deepest fullness and breadth of my eros and in my life and my gifts, and to show up in the world in the most stunning way that I can. Wow, that's a big deal. You can never bypass the separate self. The separate self, however, has a weakness. What's the weakness of the separate self? The weakness of the separate self is that it doesn't exhaust my identity. I'm not just a separate self. I am a separate self, but I'm not just a separate self. Einstein wasn't wrong when he said that the notion that I'm a separate self, and I'm paraphrasing here, is an optical delusion of consciousness. I actually am part of a wider field. Now, pre-modernity, the traditional period, often in the public teachings of religion, said that wider field is my religion, my tribe, my kingdom. So that was a hijacking of the realization that I'm actually part of a larger field. And it's not that I'm not part of my kingdom, I am. It's not that I'm not part of my tribe, I am. That's legitimate. It's not that I'm not part of my religion, I well may be, and that may be a core part of my identity. That's not all I am. Right? I'm more than that. Right? So that's separate self. Separate self is I'm not fully exhausted by those definitions. There's more of me than the pre-modern sense of the larger field, and that larger field which was identified with kingdom, tribe, religion. So I got to claim my separate self. I go from pre-personal to personal to separate self, the dignity of separate self. I'm no longer merely kind of in a pre-personal, traditional pre-modern mode, because the pre-modern mode was in many ways pre-personal. By its very nature, you don't actually exist outside of the tribe, the religion, the kingdom. So I get to this notion where I actually have real existence. Self is written in the dictionary. And then I realize it's not enough. I'm more than that. And I actually have the experience of being something like a puzzle piece, where I feel like I'm trying to complete something larger than myself. There's some place where I need to fit in, which is beyond myself. I can't quite walk around as a puzzle piece because I'm a little imbalanced, because puzzle pieces are imbalanced ever trying to walk as a puzzle piece. So I feel like I want to be part of this larger whole and I can't quite find it. Right? So when I make the separate self the end of the story, which is what Western society did, then I'm left with this imbalanced, distorted puzzle piece, unable to walk through life, yearning for some larger wholeness where I can be an essential part of completing something, but I'm told that that's just an illusion. I'm told that I just got to remain committed to the personal, that any attempt to be part of that larger space is somehow regressive. It's a regressive move. No, that's not right. It's not just a regressive move. The personal, when I make a regressive move, goes back to the pre-personal. But when I make an evolutionary move in the journey of self, I go from the personal to the transpersonal. And that's the third self. And the third self has been called by many names. The now is the domain, right, of this new self. And this new self has been called the true self. Sometimes it's even called no self, but no self meaning I'm not merely a separate self. True self means that who I really am is I'm one with the field. I'm identified with the field. I'm part of the field. And I'm no longer merely in my personality. I'm no longer only in my story. I move beyond the story of my ego, and I realize that I actually am inseparable from the larger field of value. But it's not just a field of value, it's a field of consciousness. But it's not just a field of consciousness, it's a field of desire. So there's a field of value, desire, and consciousness in which I participate, with which I am identified, which is beyond my individuated story. Wow. So now again, let's just notice in the pre-personal, I'm completely socially identified with my mother. Then I step out of that social field and I step into my separate self, right? That separate self is real. The separate self is real in the mind of God, if you will. It's a real reality. The notion you've got to just move beyond your separate self, deny your separate self, or what's often been called your ego self. It's another name for it, mistake. You never move beyond your ego self, your separate self entirely. That's an important dimension. It's the second stage in the journey of self, and each stage has to be recognized as valid, and you take the best of that stage with you to the next stage. So you remain a separate self, but then you transcend, you end the trance of separate self, and you realize, no, I'm not just a separate self, I'm also a true self. And as we've said here many times, the total number of true selves in the world is one true self. So I'm not anymore in merely the personal, I'm in the transpersonal, or what the traditions often call the impersonal. And I'm in this impersonal place. I'm beyond the personal. I'm part of the field. The field of what? The field of consciousness. The field of desire. Right? The field of value. I participate in that field. So this is not a social self in the sense of pre-personal, I'm with the mother. It's not a pre-personal self as I'm part of the field of the church, right? Or of the state, right? Or of the tribe or of the clan. No, I'm part of the ultimate field, right? The field of reality itself. And the field of reality itself is a field of value. So when we talk about the Tao, right, in one of the great traditions, the Tao is the field of value. The Tao is the field of consciousness. And the Tao correctly read, which it usually wasn't by Taoists themselves, but the Tao is the field of desire as well, right? It's the field of consciousness. It's the field of desire, right? It's the field of value. So I participate, I'm one with that field, and I can rest in that. That's called taking refuge in the Buddha. In Buddhism, in Hebrew wisdom, it's called moving from ani, from the sense of separate self, I-ness as separate self, into ayin, into no-thingness. I literally rest in the vast field and I participate in it. And when I go here, 20 years ago, Jerry Garcia, 25 years ago, and he's playing and the Grateful Dead are wild and happening, and I'm spinning at a concert and I'm following the Dead, around the world. It's because I want to have a glimpse, a taste of that experience of true self. And sometimes when I go out into nature, into the desert, or on the ocean, I feel myself merging with a larger field. Sometimes in sexing, I get beyond the personal dimension of sexing and I move into a kind of mystical sexing. And I have a sense of merging with the larger field. When I ecstatically dance, I have a sense of emptying myself out. The actual original Hebrew word for dance, mechol, means to empty out. I empty myself out and I become part of the larger field. It's a gorgeous experience. When I meditate, I have an experience of stepping out of my narrow ego story and I become part of this larger true self field, and I can rest in that field, and it's a gorgeous experience. Sometimes music transports me into the field of true self. So we all know those experiences. Those experiences where I experience my identity in this much larger way. So that's not the experience that I'm a puzzle piece. I now say, no, I'm inseparable from the puzzle. And it's beautiful. And the true self is real, but it's limited. It's the third stage in the journey. And it's limited because the way true self is usually understood and taught, because it's often experienced that way, when we don't go to the depth, we don't take true self all the way home, the experience is that I'm no longer a separate self, that I'm no longer individuated, that my personal story doesn't really matter, that my unique proclivities and unique gifts aren't that important because that's all part of my story. That's part of my separate self. I'm actually part of true self. Now that's insufficient. True self is real in the mind of God. True self is an ontological reality, but it doesn't exhaust me. And so true self is often, in its pathological view, the experience that I'm the whole puzzle. But then when I want to individuate, when I want to separate, when I want to celebrate my uniqueness, I'm told, no. Those lines you see separating the parts of the puzzle piece, those lines are an illusion. You are pure on one with the field. You're one with the field of Eros, you're one with the field of consciousness, you're one with the field of desire. And any attempt to individuate is a regressive move from the impersonal. You're lost again in the personal. And many people, a friend of mine who I do public dialogues with, wrote a book about enlightenment in which he used the word personal, and I wrote a book called Self, 2 models of self and evolutionary integral mysticism, critiquing his work. He used the word personal in his book about 55 times. In every time, he used the word personal negatively. And he actually called his society the Impersonal Enlightenment Fellowship for many, many years. The impersonal enlightenment. Let's move beyond the personal, move beyond getting trapped in the ego. Let's evolve beyond ego. No, that's not true. You never evolve beyond ego. Separate self is real. That's the second stage in the journey of self. Then you evolve beyond exclusive identification with the ego self. You realize I'm a true self. The total number of true selves are one. I rest in the field. I take refuge in the Buddha. It's one big puzzle. But then I'm told to deny the individuated puzzle pieces. And that's the pathology of being just a puzzle. So we now got to go to the 4th stage in the journey of self. When I realize, no, I'm not just one with the field of consciousness. I'm not just one with the field of desire. I'm not just one with the field of will. I'm not just one with that field. And it's very, very beautiful here. And I'm using the kind of original words of the original languages that articulated this Dharma. So I'll use a particular one. The word echad, E-C-H-A-D, echad means one. But echad is a 2-letter root, which also means yichud, which means singular or unique. Wow. So I actually have to move beyond the sense of being a true self. And I've got to re-individuate a kind of higher individuation beyond ego. And that re-individuation, I actually realize that I'm not just a true self. I'm not just one with the field. I'm actually a unique expression of consciousness, but not just of consciousness. That's a big mistake. And it's often taught that way. I'm one with consciousness. No, I'm one with consciousness and desire. I'm one with consciousness and eros. I'm one with consciousness and allurement, with consciousness and will. Who are you? You're an irreducible, unique expression of the initiating energy and eros of all that is. Right? You're a unique, irreducible expression of the love intelligence and love beauty and love desire of literally all that is, that lives in you, as you and through you, that never was, is, or will be ever again other than through you. And as such, you have an irreducible, unique perspective that no one that ever was, is, or will be has other than you. And as such, you have an irreducibly unique quality of intimacy. And as such, you desire in an irreducible, unique way. And when you clarify your desire, when you move from your surface desire to your depth desire, your deepest heart's desire is the desire of divinity. You are God's unique desire, just like you're God's unique intimacy. And you're God's unique love intelligence, and you're God's unique beauty. And those are values of cosmos. And God is both the holding field of the all and the field itself. God is the figure and the ground. God lives in us, but also holds us, right? She, it, the field, right? The force, right? The Tao, Mat, and Geist is both infinitely personal and intimate, and actually quite literally holds us and is the field itself at the same time. And so you are an irreducibly unique expression of that field, and your uniqueness is not your separateness. We disambiguate between uniqueness and separateness. You're not a only a separate self, you're a true self. You move beyond your exclusive identity with separation, but then you realize I'm not just one with the field, I'm a unique expression of the field. And to be unique doesn't mean to be separate. I can be completely part of, suffused with the field, even as I suffuse the field, and a unique expression of the field. Wow. So all of a sudden we have a narrative of identity that begins to make sense. It's centrally appropriate in our eros, in our embodiment, in our erotic signature. I'm both part of the field. I'm affected by the field. And that's what Pentland feels. And he's not completely wrong. And it's what B.F. Skinner felt, and he wasn't completely wrong. And there's a kind of disparagement of, for example, B.F. Skinner, but actually Skinner and his student, his hidden student Pentland and the MIT Media Lab are getting something right. What they're saying is that the rational actor of the enlightenment, the separate self, doesn't exhaust our identity. We're actually part of the field. Now, they can't identify, they can't find, they can't access, they haven't practiced, they haven't engaged the eye of value, they haven't engaged the eye of spirit, they haven't engaged the eye of the heart, they haven't engaged the eye of consciousness. So they're actually doing a reductive materialist enterprise, but they intuit that I'm part of something larger. So what do they identify that field with? The social field. You get it? Just like pre-modernity hijacked the intuition that I'm part of something larger and said that that which I'm part of, which is larger, is the kingdom, the religion, the tribe, or the clan. So the contemporary liberal community, not incorrectly, it's true but exceedingly partial, senses that I'm part of the larger field, senses that the rational actor that I'm supposed to be, this homo economicus, acting outright out of value and an appropriate self-interest, is actually not fully accurate, and I'm actually defined by this larger field. I'm part of this larger field. This larger field affects me, forms me. So that's social self. And it's partially true. But it's only partially true. Social self is pointing to something deeper. It's not just that I'm part of the social field, I'm part of the field itself, right? And the social field is an expression of something deeper, which is the wider sense of the intimate universe. The intimate universe means that everything is intimately coherent with everything else. Everything's fucking everything else. Everything's making love in every second. Everyone's kissing in every second. Reality is eros. Reality is erotic union all the way up and all the way down the evolutionary chain in every second. We're always in eros. We're always part of the larger field. We're always being penetrated by the larger field. We're always penetrating the larger field. We're inseparable from that field. And that field is not merely a field of materialist separate selves who aggregate in a social whole. That field is a field of value, of intrinsic value. It's a Tao of consciousness, a Tao of desire. And there are no local desires. Every desire, right, is part of the larger field of desire. So now I've got to realize that I'm not just a social self who can be, borrowing Pentland's word, manipulated by social network incentives. And those social network incentives appeal not to my deepest heart's desire, but to my lowest common denominator desire. And if you read Pentland, he's based on Kahneman, who wins the Nobel Prize for a distinction between fast thinking and slow thinking. And Kahneman points out that virtually everything we do is automatic, instinctual, reflective, habitual, all his words, and that all of those actions, which are 98% of human actions and human behaviors, can be controlled by behavioral engineering mediated through the web. Okay, I got that, but that's not the sum total of who we are. We're not just our lowest common denominator. We don't just stop at a surface separate self. We actually realize I'm part of the field, not just the social field, I'm part of the field of true self, and I'm part of the field of value. So I'm actually allured not just by the social network incentives of my peer groups, I'm allured to behavior, to action by value itself, by the field of value itself. And actually, Reality is awake and alive in me. And reality is love in action. I actually realize I'm a unique self. I'm a unique expression of value, that actually living that value, recovering that value, activating that value, giving the gifts of that value, embodying that value is actually central to answering the question of who am I? So that would be the fifth station in the journey of self, the fifth transformation. I transform from pre-personal to personal, from pre-personal self to separate self, which is personal self. Then I transform from personal self to true self, which is transpersonal or impersonal. Then I transform from true self to unique self. Now remember, I don't leave true self behind. My unique self is the unique quality of intimacy of true self living as me. It's the unique set of eyes through which true self sees. Right? It's the unique love intelligence, love beauty, and love desire. That's what my unique self is. Who are you? You are unique desire. But then I go, that's the fifth self, the fifth station in the journey of self. Then I get to 6. And 6 is, I'm not just unique self. Unique self is a puzzle piece who now completes the puzzle. And there's not just a puzzle, which would be the pure field, and there's not just puzzle pieces. I'm a puzzle piece. I recognize the idiosyncratic wonder of the kink of self that is me, and I complete the puzzle. I'm needed by all that is, and I'm intended by cosmos, and I'm chosen by cosmos. I'm desired by cosmos. I'm love adored by cosmos. I'm recognized by cosmos in my uniqueness, and I'm precisely and particularly needed to complete the puzzle. And only my unique self, my unique puzzle piece can complete the puzzle. Then I get to the 6th station in the journey of self, which is evolutionary unique self. I realize that my unique self lives in an evolutionary context, and evolution is desire. Evolution is the incessant desire of separate parts to become larger wholes. Evolution is the experience of eros, which desires ever deeper contact, ever larger wholeness, which yields in its wake ever deeper levels of creativity, depth, and transformation. So that eros, that evolution, that evolutionary desire, and evolution is desire and desire is evolution, actually awakens in me. I actually realize that my unique self is the unique face of the evolutionary impulse, awake, alive, uniquely in me. So the unique self in an evolutionary context is the evolutionary unique self. And I actually feel the full power, the full force of the evolutionary impulse moving in me, as me, and through me. And now watch what's happened. It's very beautiful. So the evolutionary impulse is both impersonal and personal. The impersonal and the personal now merge in evolutionary unique self. So if we began with the pre-personal self, then we got to the separate self, which is personal. Then we got to the true self, which is transpersonal and impersonal. It's beyond the personality, beyond the personal. Then I get to unique self, which is again the higher individuation beyond ego. So unique self is level 2 personal. It's not the level 1 personal of separate self, it's level 2 personal, right? It's personal beyond the impersonal, right? So if separate self is personal, if true self is impersonal, then unique self is the personal beyond the impersonal. And then I get again to evolutionary unique self. I get to evolutionary unique self, and the personal and the impersonal merge into one. Right? The evolutionary impulse is impersonal. It moves through all of us. Just like there's one true self, there's one evolutionary impulse. So we're now in the field of the impersonal again, but I am, as evolutionary unique self, the personal face of the evolutionary impulse. Wow. Personal and impersonal now merge in one. I'm not just a puzzle piece that completes the puzzle. I'm a puzzle piece that makes the puzzle more whole. And it adds to the puzzle. It doesn't just complete the puzzle in a static way. In a dynamic way, evolutionary unique self actually evolves the puzzle, evolves the whole thing. And then finally, I get to the last station, the last transformation. I've now transformed from unique self to evolutionary unique self. And now I transform from evolutionary unique self into a player playing his or her instrument in unique self symphony. And it's I am the unique eros of evolution living in me, as me, and through me, playing its unique instrument, which is its deepest heart's desire, which allows me to give my unique gifts in my unique circle of intimacy and influence, which I do by playing that unique instrument, which is mine to play, and the unique self symphony. And the unique self symphony is not just a unique self symphony playing a Beethoven score uniquely, it's actually writing new music. It's a jazz symphony. There's a moment where everyone steps back and it's my moment. And it's mine to play. And I've got to take my unique risk in order to play my unique instrument, right, in the unique self symphony as my evolutionary unique self. That's the seventh station. Now, friends, I've spent maybe 25 years trying to work out this very simple vision of self, but it changes everything, right? Unique self participates in the field of value because unique self is an expression of true self. Unique self can access value, and unique self can live in your unique perspective, and my unique quality of intimacy, even as I hear all the other instruments in the symphony. Unique self is the only response to loneliness. It's only by sharing my unique self, my soul print, if you will, with someone else and being recognized and received that I move beyond loneliness. Sexing, the only way to move beyond pornography is actually through a sense of intense uniqueness about my sexuality. Pornography is the field of the impersonal. The only way to actually respond to pornography, right, in a way that's powerful, is to actually realize that sexing is not an event, it's a journey, and that journey is an utterly unique journey. And we engage pornography because we're afraid of the uniqueness of our own desire. We're not willing to step into the utter unique nature of my sexing. So what we call unique self-sexing is not just sexing between unique selves who recognize each other's unique self in their sexing. That's one dimension of what we call unique self-sexing. In a work we call the Phenomenology of Eros, which outlines a new vision of sexuality and a new sexual narrative. But one of the 7 levels of what we call the 7 levels of sexing, unique self-sexing, is classically we've understood it and explained it as sexing between unique selves, but it's also the uniqueness of my sexing. And that's how I respond to pornography. I can be swept away by the impersonal pornography when I'm not actually the utter unique quality of my unique story of desire. Joy is a byproduct of living my unique self. You can't pursue joy. Joy is only available as a byproduct of being in the depth of my unique self and my unique self story. Love is a unique self-perception. It means I see your unique self. Self-love means I see, I rejoice, I celebrate my unique self. All we spaces cannot be formed by anything other than unique selves and evolutionary unique selves. Separate self can't form we space. It's why Hobbes said separate selves come together and there's a state of war, because there's rivalrous conflict governed by win-lose metrics and you can't move beyond it. And true self, I'm part of the field. If I'm part of the field, I'm not sufficiently individuated to come together to form connection, to form union, because I'm not singular enough to form a larger union. Pre-personal self, obviously, can't form we space, can't form intimate communion. So we space, intimate communion, can only be formed by unique self. Uniqueness is not the currency of alienation. Separation is the currency of alienation. Uniqueness is the currency of connection. Unique selves connect, they form we spaces. So this narrative of identity, this journey of 7 stations of transformation, it's that story, that response to the answer of who are you, that begins to create for us coherence. We begin to understand that that which unites us is far greater than that which divides us. And that which unites us is both our sameness and the fact that what we all share in common is our uniqueness. And this is a story of self that we validated in a large book called Your Unique Self with extensive footnotes. We're now rewriting it as Unique Self Theory, and another book called Unique Voice. But it's also an understanding of self, which is the best understanding of self we have today. And if we had more time, which we don't, I would actually show how we've taken from validated insights in pre-modernity, the traditional period, how we've taken from validated insights in modernity and how we've taken from validated insights in postmodernity and woven them together in this new emergent, this new story. But story not in the sense it's a conjecture, not in the sense that it's made up. It's a story of value, which is the value of the irreducible, unique self that plays his or her instrument in the unique self symphony. And it's from that place that I pray. And so we're about to move into prayer, friends. Okay, we're about to move into prayer. We're going to end with prayer. I can't pray as a separate self. The distance between me and the divine is too far. When I pray as a separate self, then I feel a sense of self-abasement. I have no power. All I can do is fall before you, right, as a worm, right, as one who is utterly without true dignity and value. So why do I even have a right to approach infinity in prayer? As true self, I also don't pray, because as true self, I'm tempted to kind of lose myself in the larger field and I become indifferent to my individuation. So prayer comes from unique self, the unique expression of true self. True self is the field of the divine. I participate in the field of divine, which is the field of consciousness, which is the field of eros, which is the field of value, which is the field of desire. But not only do I participate in that field, I uniquely individuate from that field as unique self, and then I turn to the infinity of personhood, which is divinity. Right? Now stay close, okay? Stay close, stay really close. We're going to go to the last step. It's so beautiful and it's so just stunning when you begin to see this new worldview, this new emergent. At the level of separate self, I form my God as a divine separate self. When I experience myself as a separate self, then God becomes the divine separate self. So God becomes my God, or the God of my religion, or the God of my people, who's separate from the manifest world, who speaks to the manifest world. That's precisely how separate selves talk. So the separate self manifests a vision of divine as a separate self, or the divine as kind of the ultimate force and power that loves only my people. So God's separate from the world, loves only my people. If I experience myself as true self, the classic vision of mystical and often, although not always, Eastern enlightenment, then there is no personal to God, right? So in the separate self, God is level 1 personal, just like I'm level 1 personal. So God's the creator God outside of the world who speaks to me and knows me personally. And there's a level of truth to that. There's a level of depth to that. But then I get to true self and I say, no, there is no personhood to God. That's ridiculous. That's an anthropomorphic idea. You know, if I have any notion of divinity, then divinity is the field. I can experience divinity, right, as the fields of energy, the fields of consciousness, the fields of desire, right? And so God becomes completely impersonal, right? The Force in Star Wars, right? Impersonal. But then, right, when I get to unique self, the unique expression of the larger field, I realize I've now reclaimed my personhood, and it's beyond the field. I'm a person, I'm an individuated personal expression of the field. Then I realize, that one of the faces of the field itself is personhood. That God herself is not just the infinity of power, but actually the infinity of personhood, the infinity of intimacy. That she has a personal face, and that personal face meets my personal face, and that's prayer. Where the unique self in its intimate personal face meets in the holy and broken hallelujah, the intimate personal face of the divine, who is both the field and the infinite personhood of that field. Wow. And so from that place, we turn to you, God, who knows us and we know you, and we participate in you. And we need you, and you participate in us, and you need us. And God Goddess is in search of man and woman, and man and woman is in search of God Goddess. We're looking for each other. We need each other. That's the mystery of cosmos. That was the intention of infinity. That infinity and finitude come together and realize that we're part of the same field, and that we're we're partnering with each other in some deep, profound, wild, unimaginable way. We need each other. Wow. So we turn to God and we bring God our holy and our broken hallelujah. We stand naked, confessional, everything. We offer it all up, nothing hidden. And he, the infinity of intimacy, takes all of us and holds us and says, I got you. I'm holding you. Every place you've been, every place you've fallen into my hands. Then we pray. And in that prayer, we literally ask for everything. Because prayer affirms the dignity of personal need, the need of unique self, the individuation beyond the ego self, the personal face of the infinite living in me, as me, and through me. And with that, we go into prayer. Thank you, everyone. Let's pray like we've never prayed before. And let's ask for everything. And as we hear Leonard Cohen kind of pray in the center for us, let's write in the chat box any requests, any prayer for Uncle Morris to get better, right? For have enough finances to live my life well, right? For my friend with Parkinson's to be fully healed, right? To be able to make love in a new way, to be touched in a way I've never been touched before. For my son, my mother, my friend, right? To stabilize and balance, right? Ask for everything. That's what we pray. We ask for everything. Take us inside.
Now I've heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord. But you don't really care for music, do you? It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah.
read some of those prayers from the chat box. I read Becca. I pray that my reception of the divine field grows with my capacity to co-create. Shahat, I pray that I can always be vulnerable and that I can honestly confess that I need you. Rob, I pray that our love will find other love and spread more and more and more. Tom, I pray that I may be free of my resistance to stepping boldly into the unique self-symphony with all that is mine to offer. Brent, I pray that I remember and sleep better tonight. Kyle, I pray that my wife and I stop playing the finite games and begin to embrace the infinite. Myra, I pray for successful surgery and freedom from pain. Claire, praying that my daughter Kiara heals from her migraines. Colleen, love all the way with my husband and myself. David, I pray that I can contribute my unique gifts for the sake of evolving my new community, for the sake of evolving all communities and participating in the evolution of love. Mariana, I pray for support, help, a network of connection and being seen and understood. Margie, I pray for the board members to come to Empower Me Strong, who are willing to play in the field of infinity of intimacy with me. Lynn, I pray that we all play our instrument fully together in this symphony. And there's many, many, many more prayers, and we all bring them together and we lift them up to the sky. And as we say, we press them on the lips of God, and we know that they are heard and that they are received. And I realize that we are over time, and I appreciate you for still being here. And I do want to take a moment to be in this together, to feel in this together, because today was a lot. We made a whole huge evolutionary journey, first looking at why the narratives of identity that are currently in our world aren't working and why we so desperately need this new narrative of identity. And then Mark took us through this whole, all the stages of self, all the way to evolutionary unique self, all the way to unique self symphony. And that is the invitation for each and every one of us to play our unique instrument in the unique self symphony as we are together responding to the meta crisis, responding to the existential risk that we are facing as humanity. And I realize that a lot of people here come here every week and they've heard the Dharma so many times and they're like, yes, yes, yes. And it's good to hear it again and again and again. And we get new insights from it every time. But I also realize that there's a lot of new people here. And for some of us, if we are new, and we are all new every week, so we can also have a lot of questions like, what is the techplex? Or what is the field that Mark is speaking about? Or what is true self, actually? And there's a lot of explanation that is happening today that we received today. But also, if you don't get everything at once, please know that you're not stupid, because we are all crazy smart, and it needs time to practice, to study, to learn this Dharma and to make it our own. So if something is going too fast, please just relax and don't try to understand everything at once, and just kind of receive the energy of what is here, because I know that in our heart, in our body, we can all feel the truth of what is spoken here. So as we come back and we come back again and again, the Dharma will become more clear, but also trust that it is already happening and moving inside of us. And with that, there is, of course, also an invitation to study the Dharma, to really make it our own and really begin to understand precisely the distinctions that we're speaking of here. So Mark mentioned it already, and one of the ways to do that is by studying this book. It's called Your Unique Self, A Radical Path to Personal Enlightenment. And that's really what it is. It is a path to enlightenment. So we can really take the rest of our lives and if we believe that the rest of our future lives, to study this and to become this. So this is one way to do that. We also have a beautiful course with the same name, Awakening as Your Unique Self. And that is a way to kind of self-study this Dharma and make it your own. We just started a co-study group. That one is closed right now, but we will continue in January in the Unique Self Institute to study together with Claire Molinar and Dr. Mark Gaffney. So starting January, you can join that course and really deepen this Dharma of Unique Self. And next to studying, we are also inviting each other to become and enact the Dharma by making our contribution here in this revolution. And I can speak from my own experience that this is really ours to do together. We say it all the time, but it's really true. It doesn't belong to one person. It's not a company that Mark owns or I own or you own. This is our revolution, and we're embodying and we're practicing becoming an evolutionary unique self symphony. So the great joy of stepping in and participating and contributing is that we can actually experience what we're speaking of here in our own daily lives. So if you want, you are welcome to join in any way that your heart desires. But one of the ways of doing that right now is that we're building a symphony around editing these weekly evolutionary sense making. So we are in week 313 now, and all of those recordings have been transcribed. And from those transcripts, we are now creating books. And what we're doing is a very light, poetic editing, and we've developed a style for that, and we're creating a team for people to be editing these weekly live streams. And it's really amazing what is happening there, because it's a beautiful way to study the Dharma, to go through it very precisely and to read it again and again and again, and to come to a deeper understanding as you're also making your contribution to the revolution. So what we decided to do actually is start what we're calling an editing course. And Elena is one of the amazing unique selves that stepped into the symphony by really showing us how this editing is being done. And she is going to take us through a 4-week course showing us how to edit an episode into that new style. So we already have a group of editors, but you're welcome to still join us if you are interested in editing, if you have at least 5 hours a week to spend, and if you want to know what it means to contribute to evolutionary sense-making books, please reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat box, and I would love to tell you more about that. Now we close, as we do every week, with a beautiful little dance party. And all of us are invited to turn on your camera so we can actually see each other. And we're going to turn on some music, and we will see each other on the other side. Thank you so much for joining, and I can't wait to be together again next week. Thank you.